Rome did not fall in a day. It collapsed over 200 years, and almost nobody noticed while it was happening. Now I want you to ask yourself one question. What if the same process, the exact same process, is already underway in America right now? Not as a theory, not as a warning, as a fact, hiding in plain sight. Part 1. The empire nobody thought could fall. At its peak, Rome was untouchable. It controlled 70 million people. It had the most advanced road network in the ancient world. Its military was the most sophisticated fighting force that had ever existed. Its currency, the denarius, was accepted from Scotland to Syria. If you were alive in 100 AD and someone told you Rome would be gone in 400 years, they would have laughed you out of the room. Sound familiar? Because right now, in 2024, the United States controls the global reserve currency. It spends more on its military than the next 10 countries combined. Its economy is the largest in human history. Its cultural influence reaches every single corner of the planet. Rome looked exactly like this, right before the rot set in. And here is the thing most historians won't tell you. Rome did not lose a single catastrophic war that ended everything. There was no one moment where the lights went out, the collapse was quiet, it was institutional, it was financial, and it was completely self-inflicted. That is what makes it terrifying, and that is exactly what makes it relevant today. Part 2. The first mistake. Endless military overreach. Let's go back to 100 AD. Rome is at its absolute height under Emperor Trajan. The empire stretches from Morocco to Mesopotamia. Trajan is conquering new territories every few years. The Roman Senate is celebrating. The crowds are cheering. The propaganda machine is running at full speed. But there is a problem nobody is talking about. Every new territory Rome conquers costs money to hold. You need soldiers stationed there. You need roads built. You need local administrators paid. You need grain supplied. The further you expand, the more expensive the empire becomes to maintain. Trajan's campaigns in Mesopotamia alone cost Rome the equivalent of billions in today's money. And here is the brutal reality. Those territories never generated enough tax revenue to justify the cost of holding them. Rome was spending more to keep its empire than its empire was making. Now let me ask you something. The United States has been at war for 93 out of the last 100 years. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan alone cost over $8 trillion. And what did America get in return? Not oil contracts, not territory, not economic dominance in those regions. It got nothing that covered the bill. Roman pattern is textbook. Expand, overextend, spend, repeat, until the treasury starts bleeding. But here is where things took a dark turn for Rome. And this is the part most people completely miss. Part 3. The second mistake. Debasing the currency. Wars are expensive. Bread and circuses are expensive. Keeping 400,000 soldiers paid across a continent-sized empire is expensive. And by the 200 SAD, Rome was starting to run out of silver. So Rome's emperors did what desperate governments always do. They cheated. A Roman denarius in 100 AD was 90% pure silver. By 200 AD, it was 50% silver. By 270 AD, just 170 years later, it was less than 2% silver. The Roman government was literally melting down coins, mixing in cheap metals like copper and tin, and minting new coins that looked real but were essentially worthless. This is called currency debasement, and it is the oldest trick in the book. What happened next was predictable and catastrophic. Merchants figured it out, prices doubled, then doubled again. The Roman economy started experiencing something that felt completely alien to them. Inflation. Persistent, grinding, unstoppable inflation. A loaf of bread that cost 1 denarius in 100 AD cost over 200 denarii by 300 AD. Soldiers were paid in coins that lost value faster than they could spend them. The middle class was wiped out. Savings became worthless. Trade started collapsing because nobody trusted the currency anymore. Now, let me bring you back to 2024. The United States printed more money between 2020 and 2022 than it had printed in its entire prior history combined. More money, in 2 years, than in 240 years of American history. The Federal Reserve took its balance sheet from $4 trillion to $9 trillion in less than 2 years. The M2 money supply, which measures how much money is circulating, increased by 40% in 24 months. And then Americans started noticing that groceries cost more, rent cost more, cars cost more, everything cost more. This is not a coincidence. This is the same mechanism Rome used. The method is different. Rome shaped silver off coins. America runs a digital printing press, but the underlying logic is identical. You are spending more than you have, so you manufacture the difference and hope nobody noticed too. They noticed, but the currency debasement was not even Rome's most dangerous mistake. That one is coming. And when I show it to you, I think you will feel a chill. Part 4. The third mistake, political paralysis and institutional decay. Here is something remarkable about Rome that almost nobody talks about. Between 235 AD and 284 AD, a period historians call the crisis of the 3rd century, Rome had 26 different emperors in just 49 years. 26. Most of them were assassinated by their own soldiers or political rivals. The average reign was less than 2 years. Think about what that does to a civilization. You cannot build long-term infrastructure when your government changes every 18 months. You cannot maintain consistent economic policy. You cannot plan military strategy. Every new emperor came in, reversed the decisions of the last one, rewarded his own allies, punished his enemies, and drained the treasury doing it. Rome's political class became more focused on capturing power than on governing effectively. The Senate, once the most respected institution in the world, became a corrupt rubber stamp. Laws meant for ordinary citizens stopped applying to the powerful. The gap between the political class and the average Roman citizen became a chasm. Sound familiar? The United States Congress has an approval rating of around 13%. The Federal Reserve has never been audited. The U.S. government has failed its own financial audit 7 years in a row, meaning the Department of Defense literally cannot account for trillions of dollars in spending. The political cycle in Washington has made long-term economic planning almost impossible. Infrastructure bills take decades. Budget negotiations reduce government shutdown. Two parties are more focused on defeating each other than on solving the country's structural problems. I am not making a left or right argument here. This is not about party politics. This is about what happens to empires when their institutions stop functioning. Rome showed us the answer with brutal clarity. When the institutions rot from the inside, the empire does not need an external enemy to bring it down. It brings itself down. But there is one final mistake, and this is the one that truly ended Rome. This is the one that sent chills down my spine when I first researched it, because of how closely it mirrors what is happening in America today. Part 5. The fourth and fatal mistake, outsourcing your own defense. By the 300 SAD, Rome had a serious military problem. Roman citizens no longer wanted to join the army. Military service was brutal, poorly compensated in a currency nobody trusted, and the empire felt distant and abstract to most ordinary Romans. Patriotism had eroded alongside purchasing power. So Rome did something that seemed practical at the time. It started hiring foreign mercenaries, Germanic tribes, Goths, Vandals, Franks, to fight its wars. These soldiers were called foederati. They were skilled, they were effective, and they were cheap compared to maintaining a full Roman citizen army. At first it worked perfectly. Rome outsourced its military burden and maintained its empire. But here is the problem. These mercenary soldiers had no loyalty to Rome. They fought for pay. When the pay ran out, and it did, because the treasury was collapsing, they stopped fighting for Rome and started fighting against it. In 410 AD, Alaric, a Gothic general who had previously served in the Roman military, sacked Rome. A man who had worn the Roman uniform turned his sword on the city he once protected. The empire had hollowed out its own defense by outsourcing it to people who had no stake in its survival. Now, tell me this does not sound familiar. The United States has been systematically outsourcing its manufacturing base since the 1980s. Not soldiers, but something arguably more important in the modern era: industrial capacity. The ability to actually make things. China manufactures 28% of global industrial output. The United States manufactures 16%. America imports the majority of its pharmaceuticals, the majority of its electronics, the majority of its rare earth minerals needed for weapon systems and technology. The F-35 fighter jet, America's most advanced military aircraft, contains components made in countries that are not American allies. During COVID-19, the United States could not manufacture enough masks, ventilators, or basic medical supplies for its own population. The most powerful economy in human history was dependent on foreign supply chains for hospital gowns. Rome outsourced its legions. America outsourced its factories. The mechanism is different. The vulnerability is identical. Stop being able to produce the things your civilization needs to survive. You become dependent on people whose interests do not align with yours. And history has one very consistent answer for what happens next. Part 6. But wait, is this the whole story? Now, before you walk away thinking this is purely a doom story, I need to be honest with you about something. Rome's decline took 200 years, and during those 200 years, there were moments of genuine recovery. There were reformers. There were emperors like Diocletian and Constantine who saw the problems clearly and fought hard to reverse them. Diocletian restructured the tax system and divided the empire to make it more manageable. Constantine moved the capital to Constantinople, and that eastern half of the empire, the Byzantine Empire, survived for another 1,000 years after Rome fell. Civilizations are not condemned to repeat history, but, and this is the crucial point, they only escape the pattern when they are willing to honestly face what is happening. The Romans who were able to adapt survived. The ones who kept insisting that Rome was eternal, that its problems were temporary, that the critics were just pessimists, those are the ones history swallowed whole. America still has advantages Rome never had. It has a dynamic private sector that Rome lacked. It has genuine democratic institutions, however imperfect, that Rome's republic had abandoned long before the fall. It has a technological edge that is historically unprecedented. It has the ability to course-correct if its citizens and leaders actually choose to. The question is not whether America can avoid Rome's fate. The question is whether it will. And the first step to avoiding a fate is being honest enough to see it coming. The pattern in one sentence. Here is the lesson that Rome spent 400 years learning. Empires do not fall because of their enemies. They fall because they abandon the principles that made them powerful in the first place. Rome built its greatness on disciplined finances, strong institutions, civic participation, and a currency its people trusted. When it abandoned all four, slowly, quietly, while the crowds were distracted by gladiator games, the empire became a shell. Massive, still impressive from the outside. Hollow core. The same four pillars, the same abandonment, the same distractions. History does not repeat itself exactly, but it rhymes so closely that if you know where to look, you can almost hear the echo. And right now, if you listen carefully, America is starting to rhyme. I want to leave you with one final thought. The average Roman citizen living through the decline of the empire did not know they were living through the decline of the empire. They just knew that bread was getting more expensive, that politics felt more chaotic, that something felt off. But nothing catastrophic had happened yet. Life continued. The market still opened, the streets still functioned. The empire still looked powerful from the outside. That is the most dangerous phase of any collapse, the phase where the damage is structural but the surface still looks intact. Because that is the phase where you still have time to act. That is the phase where decisions made informed, aware people can actually change outcomes. That is why this channel exists. Finance Historian is not here to scare you. It is not here to sell you gold or push a political agenda. It exists because the most powerful thing any person can do in uncertain times is understand what has happened before. Because the patterns are real, because the warnings are written in history, and because most people are never shown how to read them. If you want to be the kind of person who sees these patterns before they become headlines, not after, then this community is where you belong. Subscribe to Finance Historian, not for the algorithm, but because the people who understood Rome's decline while it was happening were the ones who protected themselves, their families, and their wealth. The ones who ignored it became a footnote. Which one do you want to be?